There's a rumor going around. If you like this video and subscribe, be able to use dust release. Hi guys, this is the next part of What if Itachi Uchiha was reincarnated in the world of fairy tale. I hope you enjoy. An unpleasant feeling filled the air went cold with a chilling feeling of darkness. Natsu, Gray, Sting, Rogue all began to sweat. Their bodies frozen on the spot, only able to move through their trembling bodies. The rest of Fairy Tail's members had it better. They were able to move, yet their bodies trembled from this immense pressure of power. Natsu and Gray both managed to gather enough willpower to force their legs to move a little backwards. How in the hell can someone like this even exist? Gray grunted, his Devil Slayer powers responding to E's presence. The black spots grew further up along Gray's body, and his power grew with it. Yes, he has awoken, the mightiest demon of all time. Mardgear, despite also feeling this intense pressure, let out a crazed laughter. Your end has come, Fairy Tail. Mardgear at the moment didn't bother feeling threatened or frightened by this power, too filled with a sensation of bravado. The awakening of E made even the two dragons fighting it out in the sky halt and avert their attention to this aura of darkness. This energy, don't tell me E has finally awoken. Igneel grew concerned for the safety of his son Natsu. He would have flown to Natsu's aid, if only Acnologia wasn't in his way. That monster is back. Acnologia seemed to sweat a little. He swiftly turned around while charging up a wave of blue energy within his jaw. Ready to attempt to blast E into oblivion, and with him Natsu and the others. No, Igneel roared and clashed into Acnologia, just managing to avert his breath attacks. It flew above them like a shooting star. Yet neither of them was concerned by it, all too focused on the arrival of E. Hey, he kind of resembles the Sage of Six Paths, don't you think? At least from what I've seen in ancient scripts. Kisame commented, the black spots growing around his body in response to make him stable at this immense pressure. Sasori and Kakuzu shortly followed and looked like they agreed in Kisame's statement. We're doomed, Sasori added, clicking his tongue in frustration. It even surpasses that of Acnologia. Kakuzu stopped himself from trembling, reading himself for battle that would most likely end with his own death. E stood motionless, the moonlight shining upon his pale skin. Bangs of his white hair falling over his purple blazing Rinnegan eyes. He looked into his own claws of darkness, clenching them and unclenching them. His cloak of darkness flagging behind him with the wind. His black talon feet began levitating slightly up from the ground, with the 6 black spheres circling around his back. Earlier, I could swear he was looking straight at Natsu. Sting commented, stuttering from the fear surging through his body. While Rogue was unable to even speak, petrified at E's power. Take in this moment, you mortals, and prepare yourself for extinction. Prepare to meet your end at the hands of the strongest demon. Mardgear boldly declared. This statement, however, didn't go unnoticed by a certain someone. Giema, trapped within the water sphere of Kisame's water prison, flinched. Boiling with rage, and using the opportunity of Kisame being distracted to break free. I am the strongest, Giema roared and charged at the motionless E, opening his arms ready to crush him. He broke free. Sting stared in shock. E didn't even look to Giema, he merely stretched out his right arm. Placing his middle finger and index claw over his thumb. In a split instant, E flicked Giema straight into his chest. A surge of power exploded straight through Giema's chest, leaving a giant gaping hole. The mere sound resembled that of a gunshot. Giema's eyes looked bloodshot, his mouth in a gap, and the last traces of life left the maniac's eyes as he fell over onto the ground in a loud thud. He just flicked him. Rogue and the rest stared in somewhat disbelief. E's expression remained emotionless, although unlike Itachi, he resembled more of a robot. His eyes empty, devoid of any compassion, anger or anything. He was just a weapon meant for mass destruction. E's gaze averted over to Mardgear, who wobbly stood on the sidelines. The Underworld King flinched at seeing that stare, and nervously held out E's book. And now hang on, do you not recognize this book? E looked at his own book that Mardgear held onto for his dear life. That's right, this is your book. So, you must at least understand your position in all of this, right? Until we can resurrect Master End, you must obey my orders. Then we shall fulfill Lord Zeref's wish. Fulfill our very own purpose for living. Now, my brethren, come to my side. E merely looked straight at Mardgear, his expression remaining unchanged. E slowly raised his arm, to which Mardgear looked in shock and began sweating at this sensation of fear from this intense bloodlust. And no wait, Mard Gear reached out to E, however it was too late. E swung his arm to the side, sending a wave of darkness at Mard Gear. No, Mard Gear widened his eyes at the incoming wave of darkness, and before he could plead for his life his head was blown clean off. Splattering blood onto the wall, blood gorging out like a geyser from Mard Gear's headless corpse. Who like a headless chicken took a few wobbly steps towards E, before falling over onto the floor right next to the dead Gyama. Too strong, E commented as he looked at his own arm, and for some reason the pressure around them lowered to the point where they were all able to move. What just happened? Gray looked in awe at how easily E killed Mard Gear, despite the former being weakened from his prior battle. Are you sure he isn't on our side? Natsu questioned. E then flicked his fingers in the air sending a wave of darkness clashing into Natsu sending him flying into a stone pillar. Natsu. Gray. Sting and Rogue looked with concern thinking Natsu had just met his end. Ow, that hurt. Natsu crawled out from the rubble, a little bruised up but alive. How are you? Gray looked in confusion, a look shared with the two other dragon slayers. From what I've heard, E likes to toy around with his prey. What he did to Gyama and Mard Gear was nothing but him merely testing out how much power he could use on us so we don't die right away. Looks he found the right level, Sasori explained, making them all tense up. They didn't move an inch, waiting for E to make the first move. E stretched his hand out, and all flinched getting into their individual battle stance. E merely flicked his fingers upwards, to which his book levitated out from the dead Mard Gear's hand. E twitched his wrist towards himself, and his book flew straight up to him. One of the black spheres floating around his back flew up to the book. The sphere opened and swallowed up the book, keeping it safe. Great, he just removed his greatest weakness. Sasori cursed themselves over being too distracted from Itachi's transformation to act logically. Now that his book was sealed up within that sphere, defeating E would be extremely more difficult. Neither made a single move, E merely stared at them with that emotionless stare waiting for them to make the first move. Well, Sasori, Kakuzu, guess we should go all out. Kisami's body started looking more like a shark, black markings growing on his fins and across his back. His fangs growing bigger and sharper, and a speck of darkness morphing around his hands making them into demonic-like claws. The other two followed by entering their own ethereous forms. Kakuzu growing massive wings of darkness, his 10 masks containing his hearts growing out from the wings. His hands also covered in darkness to resemble demonic claws, and out from his forehead grew black horns with the right one being bigger than the left. And Sasori grew 4 extra arms of darkness in a black scorpion tail from his lower back. Black bull-like horns sticking out sideways from his head, the black flame marks covering the entire right half of his upper body and a line of darkness going over his right eye. His right eye now black with his pupil red with a black slit. Oi, brats, you guys okay? Kakuzu looked to the shaken-up Natsu, Gray, Sting and Rogue. Seeing this level of power made these inexperienced warriors unable to move. I'm fine. Gray shook his head, cooling his head with his Ice Devil Slayer aura making him step up next to the 3 former Akatsuki members. To this Natsu looked a little amazed that Gray was able to move. Normally Natsu would jump into action on the chance of fighting Itachi. But this demon, this was totally different. Natsu gulped down his nervous feeling, seeing Gray being able to move despite this pressure made Natsu feel competitive. He wasn't about to get overshadowed by Gray. Natsu clenched his fists followed by fire flaring around him and red dragon scales growing around his body. By using his perfect dragon force, the pressure around him lessened to which he also walked up with Gray next to the former Akatsuki members. Let's go, Natsu snarled. They can't seriously expect us to fight that. Rogue and Sting were unable to move at all, and just looked onto the backs of Natsu and Gray in bewilderment. How can they fight that? How can anyone fight that? He sensed the fear of the twin dragon slayer of Sabretooth, to which he actually smirked a little, releasing his intense bloodlust. It felt like they were animals on the lone fields of the wild, hiding away from their predator. Sweat poured down Sting and Rogue's faces, their bodies trembling, they couldn't even gather the strength to back away. Hey, dragon slayers of Sabretooth! Kisame called out, blasting them with a little water in the face. Did that wake you up? Sting and Rogue looked in awe at the shark-like man. Why yeah, we're fine, just fine. Sting and Rogue unleashed their aura entering their dragon force state. They shakenly took a step forward, taking in deep breaths to gather up their strength and move forward. Considering my Devil Slayer magic, I might be our best bet to somehow take him out. Gray as the black spots grew around the right upper half of his body. The air around them freezing, making it feel like winter. Yeah, you're right, we'll act as backup. Try and make openings for you to attack. Sasori agreed to the plan and began analyzing the area, calculating his options on how to act, and how for the others to act. And I know just the thing. Sasori smirked as blue chakra strings flew out from his fingertips and attached themselves onto Sting and Rogue. Huh, what is this? Sting questioned, looking at the sudden blue strings attached to his arms and legs. I have no idea. Before Rogue could finish, he and Sting suddenly sprinted towards E, both looking confused at their bodies not moving on their own. What the hell is this? Sting looked a little freaked out, not just from moving on their own, but from getting this close to E. Suddenly both of them raised their fists, Sting's emitting a white brilliant light, and Rogue's emitting a dark shadow. Their bodies began moving in ways they never had moved before. The sheer speed and preciseness in their attacks had changed drastically. E, in response, took a few punches at first, although barely flinched at all. Then his claws of darkness expanded, taking on all of their attacks. Sting then noticed the strings leading back to Sasori. This is you, Sting shouted in a slight outrage over not having been informed of this beforehand. Yeah, yell at me later, will ya? You will break my concentration, and then he will break you. Sasori taunted, instantly shutting Sting up. The twin dragon slayers continued their assault upon E, who merely played around blocking their attacks. Jumping out from his blind spot was Gray, his fist surrounded with light purple ice gauntlets. Gray slammed his ice-covered gauntlet fist into E's face. The force of his punch and the power behind his Ice Devil Slayer powers sent E stepping sideways a few steps. E looking emotionless at the sudden punch, Gray looking astonished that the punch didn't have more of an effect. Gray kept bombarding E with his ice gauntlet fists. For each punch E took a single step backwards. Then, the ice gauntlet fist shattered into pieces from the impact they made with E. Oh crap, Gray cursed as E raised his demonic claw, and a projectile of darkness shot out from the claw and clashed into Gray's gut, sending him skidding backwards. E then tilted his claw upwards, to which the projectile flew up, clashing into Gray's jaw, sending him flying. Blood leaked out from Gray's mouth. Before the projectile could clash into him again, it was countered by a wave of water carrying Kisame with it. Outformed Kisami's arm stuck out the long blade of the executioner blade. Kisame flew into E, clashing the blade into a staff of darkness created from E's darkness. The executioner blade then broke in half upon impact. Kisame vomited out a puddle of blood, as E's claw of darkness slammed into his chest, sending him flying, crashing back into Mard Gear's throne. Kisame climbed out from the ruins of the throne, letting out gasps of air while his darkness gathered to his chest. That broke a rib, Kisame uttered as a trail of blood ran down from his lips, as he stared up at the incoming E. Ice Devil. Rage. Gray unleashed a mighty wave of a light purple blizzard of ice. E grabbed a hold onto the ice wave, feeling the shards of the ice digging through his darkness that splattered across the floor. E in response twisted his hands sideways, tearing through the ice blizzard wave, negating it like it was nothing, and the darkness regrowing around his hands. A surging sensation of heat burnt across E's back. E looked from the corner of his eye, seeing Natsu leaping at him with waves of blazing fire shooting out from his hands. Not even bothering to dodge or avoid, E merely tilted his head at Natsu like if he recognized his face. Flame Lotus exploding flame blade. Natsu's fire bombarded E with a spiral fire wave, blasting into E, and yet he didn't flinch an inch. E stood there tanking the explosions of fire like it was nothing. Natsu stared in shock as out from the blazing fire, E's demonic claw stuck out and grabbed onto Natsu's neck. The fire cleared away as a surge of power extinguished the fire into nothingness. END, E uttered, and Natsu's face looked in confusion, unable to grasp the meaning behind that. Did E realize his target was to take the book of END? Sting and Rogue charged at E from behind, only for their punches to be blocked by two of E's black floating spheres. Sasori clicked his tongue, and sent his scorpion tail of darkness soaring towards E. The scorpion tail of darkness, however, bounced off from an invisible force field. Wait, that was... Sasori narrowed his gaze, recognizing that force field from somewhere. Natsu's face began looking slightly blue from getting strangled by E. Black tentacles flew to E, and wrapped around E's wrist on the arm holding onto Natsu. The tentacles tightened onto his wrist, loosening E's grip on Natsu. The tentacles came from Kakuzu, who firmly planted his feet to the ground. Kakuzu swung his body forward, pulling E away from Natsu and flying into the sky. "Now Ice Brat," Kakuzu shouted to Gray, who stood in his standard Maker magic stance. "Ice Make. Ice Fortress." Gray created multiple ice cannons lined up in rows onto the ruins of the Tartaros' hideout, all aimed directly at the flying E. Gray then, with a flick of his finger, blasted out light purple Ice Devil Slayer cannonballs. E moved 5 out of the 6 black floating spheres, clashing into cannonballs, shattering them upon impact, moving the spheres onto the next set of cannonballs. However, the ice cannonballs eventually managed to break through the sphere's defenses and blasted into E, sending him flying further back. E grew annoyed, cannonballs bombarding into his face, to his stomach, not giving him a chance to rest. E widened his eyes, to which his Rinnegan flared up in a purple glow. And expanding from around him, an invisible force field shattering all the incoming cannonballs. Then the ice cannons themselves. Followed by Natsu, Gray, Sting, Rogue, Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu getting blow away. And reducing the platform they were standing on into a giant crater. Further away at the very edge, Madara and Zirf were able to see the force field taking away a great chunk away of the ruins of the hideout. "What do you think so far?" Zirf asked, while sensing after Natsu to see if he was still alive. "Clearly holding back, but against those weaklings I can understand." Madara analyzed the power released from Itachi, comparing it to the scale it was when he awakened. "But so far, not impressed. Without Itachi in control, it is like handing great power to an inexperienced child. And what if he ever gained control of that power?" Zirf smirked, already knowing the answer. He didn't even need to look to see Madara having a wide smirk on his face. "Then I will finally have a challenge," Madara replied. Back to the ruins of Tartaros, in the crater, Gray pushed off pieces of rubble from his body. Natsu melting the rubble away from him, struggling to get back up. Sting and Rogue were knocked out unconscious. Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu all got back up no problem, having suffered minor injuries and their darkness beginning to heal them. E floated up in the sky above them, looking down on them with a shade cast over his face, with a purple light emitting from his eyes. "Entertain me," E taunted as a purple glint shining from the tip of his claw, blasting out a dark purple blast beam down onto them. "Ice Make. Ice Shield." Gray formed a giant ice shield floating in midair, blocking the beam. "Grab Sting and Rogue, and run like hell." Gray knew the shield wouldn't hold. Kakuzu extended his hands and grabbed Sting and Rogue, then they all took a giant leap back as the ice shield shattered. The beam blasted through the crater, blowing up in a fiery explosion, sending surges of wind blowing across the whole mountain. The bodies of Mardir and Giemma reduced to little more than ashes. Gray and Natsu landed next to each other, both coughing from all the dust surrounding them. "Everyone okay?" Natsu called out to locate the others. Somehow, they heard the reply from the puppet master Sasori, having shielded himself by bending the ground around him into a dome. Where Kakuzu had shielded himself and the twin dragon slayers with his wings of darkness, and Kisame had eased his fall using his water. Gray shot a glare up at E, who merely floated there, not bothering to attack. "That damn bastard, he's just toying with us." Gray snarled, slamming his hands together, feeling desperate to come up with a strategy. He widened his eyes for a second, feeling something attached to him. He looked and saw a blue chakra thread attached to his neck. With a similar one attached to Natsu, Kisame and Kakuzu, with the source coming from Sasori. There was a pause for a bit, to which he titled his head, wondering what his toys were plotting to entertain him. Gray and Natsu smirked, having a look that said, "That just might work." To this, Gray pulled his hands behind his back, filling the air with an ice-cold winter breeze. "Here goes nothing." Gray shot out 10 lances made out of the light purple Devil Slayer ice, with ice chains attached to them. E merely stared at the incoming lances, not seeming threatened. He gave a backhand to one of the lances, shattering it, while grabbing a hold of the other one, squeezing it until it cracked. Then the remaining ones clashed into his face, pushing him back a bit. Then suddenly the chains wrapped around his body, binding him. E looks to the chains wrapped around his body, the effects of the Ice Devil Slayer powers draining his own energy a little. "Chains, you're funny." E smirks and with a mere stretch of his body shatters the chains binding him. "Weak," E taunted in his own way, saying that mere tricks like that wouldn't beat him. "Hey, maybe, but it works perfectly as a distraction." Gray snickers, to which he finds himself boxed in by walls of darkness. "Nicely done, Ice Brat." Kakuzu praised, using his darkness to box E in, with only an opening at the top. Onto the walls surrounding E, popped out the masks containing Kakuzu's 10 hearts, each charging up a blast attack. E was about to fly to the top to escape. However, his path was blocked by Sasori and Natsu. Lightning Flame Dragon. Roar. Secret Puppet Technique. Grand Finale. Natsu unleashed a mighty breath attack of blazing fire mixed with intense sparks of lightning. While Sasori had 3 of his puppets gather, with one standing on top of the shoulders of the other 2 forming a triangle. The puppets opened their mouths revealing a mark, forming a bright blue pentagram symbol. And out from the pentagram a blast wave of pure energy was unleashed. E gazed up at the plummeting attacks, plus with the attacks unleashed from Kakuzu's masks around him. E was unable to think of a way out of this in time and thus he ended up caught in a massive explosion. Natsu and Sasori landed next to Gray and Kakuzu merely staring at the giant walls of darkness where smoke emitted out from the top. Here he comes. Sasori felt the pressure build up, as a force field of pure energy blasted the walls of darkness into nothing. They all covered their faces from this intense wind, looking through the gaps between their arms to see E, unharmed from the looks of it. After all that, not scratch on him, Kakuzu uttered and backed up a little. With his darkness he could have healed any injury to his body. So who knows, maybe we did give him some damage back there. Sasori replied, to which they all gulped, hoping that was true, otherwise they were in deep trouble if they couldn't even injure the demon. Water Style. Super Water Shark Bomb. Kisame jumped up from behind E, unleashing a massive-sized water-made shark. Its massive jaws open ready to devour E on the spot. He merely gazes onto the water shark, his Rinnegan flaring in a bright purple glow. E extended his right claw out, to which the water shark was absorbed into some sort of force field. Kisame widened his eyes in shock, seeing his jutsu absorbed like it was nothing. TCH. Damn, seems he is aware. That Rinnegan can absorb ninjutsu. Sasori clicked his tongue in frustration. He hadn't overlooked the ability of the Rinnegan, he had merely thought that a mindless creature like E wouldn't even think of such a tactic. E then appears before Kisame, slamming his fist into the shark demon, sending him plummeting to the ground like a meteorite. As Kisame clashed to the ground on his back, he coughed up a pool of blood. His darkness gathering around him to heal his internal injuries. Damn, that really hurt. Kisame weakly chuckled a little. In his fish-like eyes, he saw a shining beacon of light. Kisame looked closer, seeing it was a fire-covered Natsu soaring down towards E. Idiot, don't. He will just absorb your ability. Kisame warned. Lightning Flame Dragon. Sword Horn. E turned around to the incoming Natsu, his Rinnegan widening ready to absorb Natsu's flames as well. Although it didn't work, Natsu slammed into E's gut, pushing him down. He didn't absorb it, Kakuzu questioned. Could it be that the Rinnegan is unable to absorb Ethernano-based attacks? Sasori wondered, thinking back the Rinnegan had only been known to absorb ninjutsu in the past, which is chakra-based attacks. Meanwhile, at what used to be the control room within the Tartaro's hideout, Urza groggily opened her eyes, and the sight that greeted her was Mira Jane sitting over the unconscious Sela, who began fading away as Mira absorbed her with her takeover magic. Urza weakly looked over to where Kyoka had fallen, only to discover she was gone, Mira without a doubt having absorbed her as well. Urza, you are awake. Happy cheerfully held onto Urza's hand, while Panther Lily, Frosh and Lecter also gathered around Urza. Urza looked up, seeing Minerva's face, Urza's head resting on Minerva's lap. Glad to see you awake. Minerva avoided Urza's gaze with a faint blush on her face, while Urza didn't care and merely sat up. Ouch. Urza flinched from the aching pain from her shoulder. What happened? The last thing she remembered was seeing the shocked Kyuka's face while the light vanished from her eyes. Well, after Sasori helped you and Mira Jane defeat Kyoka and Sela, Kakuzu managed to stop face. And you two fell unconscious. Sasori and Kakuzu went to finish what remained of Tartaros. Minerva went on to explain the events that transpired while Mira and Urza were unconscious. Can you stand? Mira held her hand out to Urza. Having absorbed up Sela, Urza accepted the hand and was pulled up. What is this feeling? Urza questioned, sensing a strange sensation of power within the air. It feels a lot like, Urza thought back onto the events of the Eclipse Gate, and Itachi's strange transformation, and to when she saw his new form earlier. This felt like the double amount of the previous form. Back to the fight, Nastu was slapped down by E into the ground. Crashing like a meteorite to the ground, right through the various floors of the ruins of the hideout. Damn it. Natsu roared from the bottom of the ruins. Natsu in frustration slammed his fiery fist to the ground. Even though he was stubborn, Natsu could tell there was no way he could win. There was no way either of them could win. AAARRRGGGHHHH. Natsu let out a war cry, going into his dragon force, and lighting flickering around him as well. Combining both his dragon force and lighting flame dragon mode, Natsu flew right out from the ruins and straight towards E, who beat down the 3 former Akatsuki members. Feeling his new power reaching new heights, although not without cause. He could feel the lighting tear through his muscles and flesh a little, his body already began feeling numb. Kisame, Sasori, Kakuzu and Gray had E surrounded, and all looked in shock sensing the approaching Natsu. Natsu soared out from the ruins, charging directly at Natsu. Gray looked in shock, blood coming from Natsu dripped onto Gray. "That kid, his power rivals mine," Kisame commented. Natsu clashed in a headbutt to E's chest, pushing him back a little. Full-powered dragon roar, Natsu unleashed the biggest breath attack he had managed yet, a mighty wave of blazing fire mixed with lightning. Natsu roared like a wild dragon before the burning smoke cloud around E, although then the flames around Natsu were snuffed out along with the lighting. Natsu's beaten and battered body floated there for a second, then he started falling down. Unable to move a muscle, his body having gone completely numb, Natsu was eventually caught by Gray, and laid onto the ground. "You okay, man?" Gray looked to the beaten Natsu. "I can't move," Natsu uttered with a faint laughter, feeling strangely satisfied that he knew his limits. And yet, he felt like a failure for not being able to do more to save their friend. They both looked up to the smoke cloud that began clearing, revealing an uninjured E, although the flames had burnt away some darkness from his right hand. The darkness instantly regrew back into a demonic claw. E looked down upon them, looking bored, looking like he knew they had nothing more to offer him, and used everything they had against him. One of the black spheres around E floated up into the air, expanding in size with rings like Saturn forming around it. "Wait, isn't that?" Gray recognized that black sphere. It was the same thing Itachi used to defeat Hades back on Tenro Island. "Is this the end?" Gray lost the strength to keep fighting, his legs having gone numb from this overwhelming sensation of power. "There is nothing any of us can do." Gray fell to his knees, hope lost in his eyes. "Bye." He tilted his head sideways, with a smirk creeping up at the corner of his lip. Then, like a swift judgment from the heavens, a blazing wave of fire engulfs E and his attack with it, the sphere reacting to the heat of the fire and self-destructing as a result within E's own hand. "Those flames, Igneel." Natsu weakly moved his head to look up, seeing the fire dragon with his head turned from Acnologia, who blasted the dragon while his back was turned, sending Igneel plummeting like an asteroid to the ground. You kids alright?" Igneel picked himself up to recover from that cheap shot from Acnologia. The black dragon completely ignoring his surroundings and his eyes in killer intent aimed only at his greatest enemy, a dragon, at Igneel. "Hey, somehow Pops, and you?" Natsu gave a weak chuckle as he looked to where Igneel crashed. "I'm fine, merely a flesh wound." Igneel's tone of voice made one thing clear to Gray. He knows where Natsu got his personality from. The burning cloud around E was blown away by a massive shockwave, revealing the demon, having suffered minor burns that were slowly being healed by his darkness. His right arm having suffered most of the damage, his very skin burned away. The darkness cloaked his injured arm, beginning its healing process. E levitated on Igneel's left, and Acnologia on his right. Zeref's very own demon of extinction, and the black dragon Acnologia. "I'm fired up now." Igneel smirked, smoke emitting from his massive jaws at the furnace that was his power burning in his stomach. "Two dragons, how fun." E smirked, unleashing a massive aura of darkness, making the spectators of this battle cower in fear, feeling a nervous lump in their throat from this intense sensation. This sensation of power, even diverting Acnologia's attention away from Igneel, even if only for a mere moment. Acnologia instantly unleashed a mighty breath attack. Igneel instantly stiffened up and got ready to counter Acnologia's attack. Although to his surprise the blue wave of energy shot right past him and went straight for E. E held his right hand out and his Rinnegan glinted in a purple glow. The breath attack clashed into an invisible barrier around E, dividing the wave into multiple rays going around him. The rays clashed into mountains in the distance, blowing off the rocky mountain tops. The barrier expanded into a powerful almighty push, pushing back both the dragons, sending them falling into a valley. The two dragons' bodies crashed into the corner of the valley, sending rocks falling onto them, burying them. The rocks around Igneel melted away from him, and the dragons spread their mighty wings soaring out from the valley. Igneel panted and looked over to Acnologia, who had his focus on E. "Oh, are you going to help, Acnologia?" "Hey, not really, but if this demon is going to interfere in me destroying you, I cannot exactly ignore him. But once I see an opening, I will slay you, Fire Dragon King." Acnologia snarled at Igneel, and roared towards the demon of extinction. Yet he didn't even flinch, merely holding out both his claws of darkness. Bansho Tenon, both dragons suddenly felt like an invisible force pulled them in. Before they even knew how to react, they flew towards E, who expanded his demonic claws into gigantic-sized blades of darkness. Both dragons tried to at least bend their bodies to avoid getting stabbed in a vital spot. Igneel shoved his claw through the blade, leaning his head sideways, avoiding the blade barely. Acnologia managed to lean his body sideways, getting stabbed through his shoulder. Igneel pushed his claw all the way through, grabbing a hold of E, and Acnologia charged up his breath attack, aiming at getting both Igneel and E at once, not giving a damn if he ended up getting caught in the blast as well. Igneel followed the same tactic, also unleashing his mighty flames onto his two enemies. The merge of Acnologia's blue wave and Igneel's fire created an explosion of blue fire shining as brightly as the very sun. "Wow," Gray uttered as he stood over Natsu, who gave a chuckle at seeing Gray's reaction to a dragon's true power. "That's my dad," Natsu said with pride, barely able to support his body up with his elbows to get a good view of the fight. Natsu's face turned into a look of concern, as the blue fire got taken over by a whirlwind of darkness, snuffing out the fire, revealing a burnt E, pulling his blades out from the equally burnt dragons, to which they plummeted to the ground. Reality E stared down onto them with his Rinnegan, and the next moment, both dragons were trapped within in a cube of pure energy. What is this? Igneel was taken by shock as suddenly the gravity within the cube increased to such an extreme level, that both he and Acnologia were pinned down. The cube then released a dark purple wave of lightning surging into their bodies and through their scales. They both gave deafening howls of pain and agony. Natsu fell onto his back, his ears screaming in pain at the sound of Igneel's howls. "Arg, Igneel," Natsu shouted, desperately covering his ears to ease the pain of his enhanced dragon hearing. "What is that, magic? Ninjutsu?" Gray questioned, having never witnessed a spell like that, or heard anything like this from Itachi. Meanwhile, Madara curiously looked at the cube along with Zirf. "That is neither magic nor ninjutsu. What is that?" Madara looked to Zirf, who smiled, knowing exactly what it was. "Nothing special, just the ability of his Rinnegan," Zirf replied, casually leaning back, enjoying the show of seeing Acnologia in pain. "What is this Rinnegan ability?" Madara desired to learn the function of Itachi's abilities, all in order to prepare for a potential future battle. "You are a smart man, I'm sure you can figure it out." Zirf smugly looked to Madara, who grew more irritated with the Black Wizard. The dragons flinched their bodies within the cube as the electricity surged through their bodies, numbing them. "Once this is over, we'll be too numb to even fight back." Igneel snarled, and Acnologia had to agree, but Igneel was right, they were in trouble. "Don't look down on me. I am the Dragon King Acnologia." The black dragon roared, with his body a little number he was able to resist the pain better. Acnologia rose up, despite the gravity attempting to push him down. Ethernano Pulse Bomb, around Acnologia, expanded a blue shockwave in the form of an explosion, hurting Igneel while also attempting to break the cube. The cube then vanished in an instant, and the explosion from Acnologia clashed into E, sending him skidding back a great distance, while also having the darkness around his arms part away, and burning his now exposed white arms. E snarled, his eyes twitching from the painful burning sensation on his arms. The darkness cloaked around his arms once more, beginning the healing process. Igneel wobbly got back up, his body numb and burning from both E and Acnologia's attacks. Then out of nowhere he was body slammed by Acnologia. "What are you doing?" Igneel roared as he used his legs to push Acnologia off, and took flight into the sky. "Like I said, once I see an opening, I will slay you," Acnologia declared, and flew after the fire dragon, aiming to sink his fangs into Igneel's neck, although Igneel shielded himself using his wings, and then whipped his tail into Acnologia's gut. Then suddenly E joined in on the fray, slamming his demonic claws into an endless barrage of punches at the two dragons. And the dragons fought back, the intensity of their fierce blows sending shockwaves across the land. The endless cover of a two-front battle, strained the Fire Dragon King to no end. Acnologia switched from fighting E to fighting Igneel in mere seconds. While E just relentlessly attacked both Igneel and Acnologia at once. Igneel could feel his body tearing out, his magic power running low. Acnologia charged at Igneel from the front, his eyes lusting for dragon blood. While E flew over both of them, his demonic claws having expanded into gigantic size. E smacked both the dragons down at the top of their heads, then crossing his giant demonic claws together, and swinging them out, sending flying projectiles of darkness raining down upon the two dragons. Igneel and Acnologia took a break from fighting each other, and each unleashed a breath attack upon the projectiles of darkness coming their way. The light of the breath attacks, battling it out with a giant wave of darkness, blinded the two dragons. And to which he appeared in between them, his claws stretched out sideways to them. Out from the claws blasted out waves of darkness clashing into the two dragons. Igneel growled as the intense blast of the wave broke half his ribcage. While Acnologia howled as the darkness drilled through his black scales. Both dragons however ignored the pain and blasted E with a breath attack each. E, unable to react in time, got caught in the giant mushroom cloud explosion. Both dragons hovered over the black smoky mushroom cloud, waiting to see if E got out of it before continuing their own battle. How fun! The chilling demonic voice of E echoed from the smoke, as he soared out from it. His skin having suffered severe burns, the darkness flaring around him like tentacles to cover him up in order to heal his injuries. E held his hands out, forming the darkness around his arms into giant blades of darkness. The dragons could only stare, as E came at them at blinding speed. Before they knew it, he was out of their sight. Both dragons stared in shock, feeling the stingy sensation of pain. They had both been cut at their sides, blood gushing out from their wounds. Out from the two dragons' wounds, popped out waves of darkness beginning to take over and cover their bodies. He's trying to consume us. Igneel quickly acted, generating flames from his red scales, burning through the darkness. While Acnologia latched his claw onto the darkness, ripping it clean off. I've had enough of your interruption. Demon. Acnologia roared at E, who came flying back to them. Acnologia pinned his massive jaws, charging up a blue wave of energy. No, don't, Igneel warned, although his words fell on deaf ears as Acnologia unleashed his breath attack at the incoming E. Shinra Tensei E's Rinnegan flashed in a purple flare, as a force field around him expanded out, clashing into Acnologia's attack and negating it. The force field expanded even further and clashed into both dragons, sending them flying. Igneel barely managed to halt himself as he almost crashed onto the city of Magnolia. That was too close, the humans were almost caught in the crossfire. Igneel looked upon the city of Magnolia, seeing its citizens running in fear at the sight of the dragon. I can't blame them, not after what our legacy left behind. Igneel charged back into battle, eyeing the demon E, and the dark legacy of his species, Acnologia. I cannot let either of you win. Igneel roared at them. All three of them flew up into the sky, Acnologia beating on Igneel, who tried to gain the high ground. The two dragons managed to knock away E, to which Acnologia turned his focus on Igneel, sinking his fangs into the dragon's shoulder, tasting its blood. I will destroy you. I will destroy all of you. Acnologia roared and attempted to push Igneel down. And no, Igneel blasted Acnologia in the face with a mighty breath attack, and took flight into the sky. However, Acnologia merely consumed Igneel's flames and flew right at him. This is the end. Igneel flew at Acnologia as well, both dragons clashing into each other. Igneel biting down onto Acnologia's left arm, digging his fangs through his scales and flesh. And Acnologia followed, biting into Igneel's arm, and directing his right claw onto Igneel's torso. Natsu weakly looked up at his surrogate father, and Acnologia. It all happened so fast, both dragons flew past each other. Igneel having ripped off Acnologia's left arm, and Acnologia having not only ripped off Igneel's arm, but also half of his entire torso was missing. Natsu gaped in disbelief, his eyes widening in horror. Unable to move a muscle, unable to even stand. He could only lay there helpless, left to watch his father die before his very eyes. Igneel, Natsu shouted. Igneel began falling down, his jaw opening, letting go off Acnologia's severed arm. Acnologia roared in victory, and flew up ready to finish off this dragon. Only E body slammed into the black dragon, realizing the red dragon was done for. E decided to continue with the playmate he had left. Now, E glared at Acnologia, moving around the dragon's entire body at intense speed and appearing behind him. Die, E commanded, as blood splattered out from Acnologia's entire body, having left several cut marks around the dragon's body. Acnologia glared at who readied himself to finish Acnologia. Then move on to whatever was left to play with around here. Not so fast there. A foot slammed into face, sending him plummeting down. It's my turn to dance. Madara had enough of waiting, and decided to drop in, by dropkicking in the face. Madara was floating in the air, with wings of darkness coming from his back. Why you? Igneel growled as he laid on a mountain stained in his blood. He weakly directed his face to Madara, and as a last resort unleashed one last breath attack directed at the ghost of the Uchiha. Don't get in my way. You've already lost, now goodbye. Madara stared at the incoming blazing wave of hot fire, and merely crossed his arms as a gigantic spectral blue skeleton formed around him. Wielding a blue sword in hand, slicing the fire wave in half. And around the blue spectral warrior, were spinning blue circles of Yusaka beads tied into a belt. Madara looked down on Igneel, as the Yusaka beads charged up spinning at an intense rate. Natsu, before I part ways with you, I must fulfill my promise to you. There were 2 reasons we dragons lived inside the bodies of you dragon slayers. Igneel called out to Natsu, who attempted to use his chin to crawl towards Igneel. Even though he knew he wouldn't make it, he refused to give up without even trying. Tell me later, I'll save you, Natsu declared with a burning fiery passion. Just shut up and listen. It's too late anyway. First off, the reason I and the other dragons were inside you and the other dragon slayers was to create antibodies to prevent you from turning into dragons like Acnologia. Thanks to that, there is almost no chance you will ever turn into dragons. I never showed myself before under any circumstances because I was busy making these antibodies. The second reason was to defeat our dark legacy, Acnologia, ourselves. We were waiting for an opportunity for that, but Acnologia was stronger than I expected, and interfering wasn't in my calculations. Time slowed down for Natsu, as Madara threw down the Yusaka bead belts towards Igneel. Memories he had spent with Dragon, repeated in the back of his mind. Natsu even stopped his attempt to crawl towards Igneel using his chin. Only able to stare as tears formed in his eyes, his body quivering. Natsu, I've been watching you grow this entire time. You've gotten so big. The days I spent with you were the happiest days of my life. You gave me the power to love. Igneel looked towards Natsu one last time, as the blinding blue light of Madara's Yusaka beads lighted up in a bright explosion, ending the dragon's life, swiftly and quickly. Igneel. Natsu cried out in agony. Now, time to see what you have to offer me. Madara, without a single trace of guilt in his cold eyes, looked towards who had recovered from the dropkick. And eyed Madara from top to toe. I will make sure to end this quickly. I got places to be. Madara flew down towards a near mountain hill, and followed his new challenger. Madara gracefully landed, his wings of darkness vanishing. Now then, Madara was cut off from speaking as without wasting any time, directly charged at him by slamming his claw into Madara. Madara blocked the strike attempt to the side of his face, with his arm held up. Although the impact sent Madara skidding backwards, dragging the stone and dirt from the mountain up with him. Oh, I see. Madara looked to the arm he used to block strike. His entire arm had gone numb from his elbow and down. You pack quite the punch. Appeared before Madara, attempting to cut him in half with a blade of darkness. Madara merely leapt over the slice and spun kicked in the face, sending the demon onto his knees. But your attacks are sloppy. They lack grace. Madara stepped his foot onto the back of head, pushing his face into the dirt. You are no shinobi, just a wild beast. Pushed himself up, forcing Madara to jump back. The elder Uchiha knew very well that if he received a direct hit from now, he would end up in a lot of pain. So, Madara made some distance between them by backflipping further away. How sad. If only you knew how to control the beast, you might have beaten me. But as you are now, I hardly have to put in any effort. Madara waved his hand signaling for to come closer and attack. The demon looked annoyed, expanding his claws of darkness into gigantic size. He clapped his demonic claws together, squashing Madara in between his claws. Or so it seemed, when suddenly Madara popped up from the ground beneath slamming his fist into his chin so that he fell a little backwards. Madara continued by kicking in the chest, making the demon fall over. Then at blinding speed Madara formed a set of hand seals. Wood style. Deep forest emergence. Massive thick tree roots popped up around them, particularly underneath E, pushing him up. The roots expanded into giant tress, pushing E further up into the sky, the roots slamming into his body, beating him around like a ragdoll. Bloom. Madara smirked as flowers popped out from the dense forest trees, trapping E within, as the flowers released a mist of golden pollen all around E. The demon looked rather groggy, barely able to stand from the effects of the pollen. Impressive, you are able to resist the pollen's effect. Madara complimented in a slow clap. Although, you seem to be done for. Shinra Tensei, a force field expanded around E, tearing the dense forest and its flowers apart, as well as blowing the pollen away into the atmosphere. Madara covered his nose with his arm, his mighty hair blowing majestically in the wind from the shockwave. Oh, I underestimated the beast. Seems its instincts allows it to think a little. Madara gave a light chuckle, as his Sharingan formed into the Rinnegan. I expected that I would need to use this. Let's see if you can exceed my expectations. Limbo. He widened his eyes as he saw 4 other Maderas charging at him. Although his Rinnegan could detect like if they were in a different dimensional plane. The shadows of Madara bombarded E with various skilled attacks. Swift moves E wasn't able to predict nor dodge. Each shadow then flared up in a blue aura, creating 4 gigantic perfect Susanoo. Each of the spectral warriors drew a gigantic katana-shaped blade and slammed them down onto E. He held his hands out, expanding his claws of darkness and caught the blades. Madara looked in surprise. E was only pushed onto one knee from the pressure of his Limbo clone's perfect Susanoo swords. Truly his demonic strength was impressive. Very well, let's see how you do with 5. Madara created his own perfect Susanoo, slamming its sword down into the mix, pushing E further down into the ground. This time the demon was on both his knees, and a giant crater formed beneath him from this intense pressure. Reality. In a flash, appeared an armada of Igneel and Acnologia surrounding Madara and his Limbo shadows. Ho, this is your Rinnegan ability. Madara smirked as the armada of thousands of Igneels and Acnologias bombarded Madara, his Limbo clones and their perfect Susanoo, tearing the 5 spectral warriors apart piece by piece, and he then gathered energy into his demonic claws, holding onto the broken blades of the spectral warriors, and blasted them with a wave of fire and dark lightning, destroying the Limbo shadows. Madara leapt out from his perfect Susanoo before it was destroyed. Madara landed before E, looking upon the demon with a smirk as E got back on his feet. I see. That's your ability. You showed it to me when you fought those 2 dragons earlier. At first, I wasn't quite sure what it was. But now I know. Your Rinnegan allows you to make any object or thing you want into reality. Just like an illusion, anything you imagine in your head is made, only this time into a reality. Although, it seems you cannot affect a person with it. Such as making me explode from the inside as an example, or make me melt away. But you can create things that can hurt, or even kill me. Quite an impressive ability. Madara analyzed E, seeing the wild beast of a demon not attacking him a second time, and the armada of Igneels and Acnologias vanishing before his eyes. Seems there is a time limit for the things he makes into a reality can last. And a time limit before he can use that ability again. And as this wild beast, his imagination of what he can create is limited as well. E and Madara locked eyes, their Rinnegan flickering in a purple flash. E, seeming annoyed with the Uchiha, unleashes his full power as a result. As a massive pillar of darkness rises from beneath him and beyond into the clouds and the sky. The shaking from his power caused boulders to rain down from the mountains. A giant boulder rolled towards E, only to get incinerated at getting in contact with his dark aura. Meanwhile, the fairy tale crew had to get into cover as the boulders came raining down onto them. Shit. Kana held her arm out, unleashing fairy glitter onto some of the incoming boulders. Kana, look out. Wakaba called out to her, as a boulder flew over the smoke left from the fairy glitter and threatened to crush her beneath it. Kana stood there frozen, her eyes widened at the incoming boulder. Raging bolt. A bolt of lightning rained down from the sky, incinerating the boulder in an instant. Kana blinked her eyes for a second, and turned around to see a sick Laxus getting supported up by Juvia and Lucy, with Levi standing behind them with Gajiel. Laxus looked pale. He had bags under his eyes and blood running down from his lips and nose. Even the 2 girls supporting him were shocked to see Laxus stretching out his right arm, and able to use more magic in his condition. Laxus, Lucy, Levi, Juvia, Gajiel. Kana uttered, a little taken aback over having almost been crushed to death. She got over the shock, and along with Macau, Wakaba, Elfman and Lizana rushed over to them. "You guys okay?" "Well yeah, mostly. Have either of you seen Natsu?" Lucy asked, looking slightly concerned for the pink-haired dragon slayer, as they all witnessed Ignil's death earlier. "No, afraid not," Lizana replied, also looking worried for her old friend. More boulders came flying down towards them, all letting out gasps only for the boulders to freeze into solid ice, and then shattering to pieces. "He'll pull through. He just needs time." Gray arrived with the 3 former Akatsuki members, and Kakuzu carrying both an unconscious Sting and Rogue. At the sight of the former newcomers, some let out gasps, others glared. "Looks like we won't get the warm welcome we hoped for, boys," Sasori said with a slight hint of sarcasm in his tone. "Oh well, not that it matters." Kakuzu threw down the 2 unconscious dragon slayers onto the ground like sacks of potatoes. "Couldn't you have been a little easier on them?" Kisame looked to Kakuzu with his sharky fangs in a smirk. "What, want me to set out a few comfy blankets first?" Kakuzu glared back at the sharkman, who gave a light humorous chuckle. "Where is Natsu?" Lucy decided to ask, not wanting to argue as to why 3 dangerous potential enemies were here. "Back up there." He looked like he wanted to be alone for a bit. Gray looked up to the top of the ruins, a look of sympathy for his mourning friend. The next moment, Wendy came teleporting in with an injured Doranbolt and Carla. "Is everyone alright?" Happy came flying in with Panther Lily and the 2 Sabertooth Exceeds, with Mira Jane and Minerva supporting up a beaten Urza. "Mostly," Wendy replied, looking towards Doranbolt and his burnt arm. "Where is Natsu?" Happy looked around for his companion. He wants to be alone." "Happy, he isn't." Lucy couldn't say another word, feeling sad for Natsu. Although she didn't need to say any more, as the blue Exceed seemed to understand, and his tail and ears went down as a result of feeling sad. "Oh, I see," Happy muttered and flew down to the ground while looking down. "Where is Itachi?" Urza asked, seeming serious, as she usually would call him Oni-san, or brother. To this, everyone looked towards the hills in the mountain where they saw bright lights from explosions. Madara was leaping backwards, avoiding projectiles of darkness. And he closed in on him, flying while the projectiles shot out from his coat of darkness. Madara moved like a dancer, avoiding each of the projectiles with grace and ease, without breaking a sweat. Madara smirked as he slammed his claw down onto him, but Madara just backed up so I's hand flew straight through the ground. Madara grabbed onto his wrist, and delivered a kick to the demon's chin. "Predictable," Madara mocked, his body releasing a cold breeze. Ice crystal machine gun. Madara shot out giant horse carriage-sized ice crystals, blasting into the endless bombardment of giant ice crystals kept pushing back step by step. Snarled in frustration and let out a mighty roar, to which the ice shattered from the power unleashed around him. Scary, Madara gave a playful smirk, seeing charging at him, blinded by rage. "Not fun playing when you are losing, is it?" Madara held his hand out. Shinra Tensei Madara blasted a force field into sending him flying, crashing into a mountainside. He slowly rose his hands up, to which the rubble around him wobbled up into the air. Boom! Madara swung his arms down, sending the rubble of boulders flying into and the demon powered through the assault, not looking like he received any damage. Blasted a wave of darkness towards Madara, who took a single step to the side. The darkness barely catching a few strings of his long majestic hair as it flew by him. "Kill, I will kill you," he roared at him, to which Madara merely chuckled and waved his hands, challenging to come and try. He charged like the wild animal he was, and threw a punch. The demon widened his eyes, seeing Madara had caught his fist. Numbing, even with this Madara's hair blew away from his face, revealing the same black flame marks growing on his face as it did with Itachi. "Your power does exceed my expectations, but with your wild and predictable attacks, it won't matter." Madara threw an uppercut punch to I's chest, digging it in really deep. He flinched, his eyes twitching as blood dripped out from his nose and lips. "And even if my strength in this form doesn't exceed your current level, I can still do damage if I know just where to hit." He couched up more blood as Madara twisted his fist in I's chest. To Madara's surprise, however, he grabbed onto his arm in a tight grip. "Caught you," he smirked, bloodlust and killer intent leaking out from him all at once. "Die." He swung his blade of darkness transformed arm at Madara. He cut right through Madara's body, splitting him in half. What followed was an explosion as Madara had blown up his own shadow clone. See, You can't even tell the difference between a real person and a shadow clone with that beastly mindset of yours." Madara chuckled at seeing I's perplexed facial expression as the smoke from the explosion cleared away. I grinded his teeth in anger and frustration, glaring daggers at Madara. "Face it, you can't even touch me, let alone defeat me." Arg! I raised his arm into the air, and a glint appeared out of nowhere. Reality. Down from the sky, shot down a beam of pure magic energy down upon Madara. The members of Fairy Tail stared in the distance, looking in shock as they all knew what that blast was. "That's..." Lucy uttered in disbelief. The Etherian, Urza looked in disbelief as the council is said to have removed that weapon after the Tower of Heaven fiasco. The burning light of magic power clashed down onto the mountain, although it was held back by a spectral blue warrior. "Oh, I see, the time limit until you can use that Rinnegan ability again is 10 minutes. And, the more power there is in what you imagine, the shorter it lasts. Those copies of Acnologion Igneel earlier lasted less than a minute. And this..." Madara looked up at his Susanoo holding the beam back, then it faded away into nothing. "Lasts for a total of 1 minute and 15 seconds. I suspect if you created something simple as a sword, it would last for years. I think I understand your ability better, Itachi." I had enough, and charged head-on at full speed, beginning to throw a barrage of relentless punches, and Madara dodged every blow while sneaking in a few punches of his own, all successfully hitting vulnerable spots. "Let's end this, shall we?" Madara grew tired, having seen what he needed. As he steadily grew the speed of his attacks, Madara's demonic black marks grew around his body to boost up his physical abilities. With Madara boosted up abilities, he was with ease able to dodge the simple wild attacks of I. He raised his right arm, growing his demonic claw into a giant blade of darkness. He swiftly swung the blade aiming at Madara's neck. Madara bent his body backwards, dodging the blade by an inch. Madara then swiftly moved and kneed I in the chin, sending him flying a little over the ground. Madara jumped up and span his body, delivering a swift kick to I's chest, sending him flying back. I growled like an annoyed wild animal. He recovered from the kick, halting himself in midair. I took a back flip and flew into the sky. 5 out of the 6 spheres surrounding I levitated up beyond into the clouds, the 6th one being the sphere containing his Aetherius book. The 5 spheres grew in tremendous sizes, and rings like the Saturn began surrounding them. I glared down at Madara, the demon of war, standing there with his arms crossed, looking with a smirk. "My, how dangerous." Madara chuckled as the black markings on his body grew into a black cloak of darkness, a pair of black horns growing from his forehead. The black marks growing around his face in a similar pattern to Hashirama's Sage Mode, the darkness covering his hands. And his skin turning pale white, and his hair turning from black to silver white. Aetherius form, the demon of war. Dark solar barrage. He tossed down the giant Saturn-shaped spheres of darkness upon Madara. Madara also had 6 black spheres floating around him. The spheres levitated over him, spinning around in a circle with purple lightning generating in between them. The spheres flew up into the sky, generating into the clouds, pulling them in towards them. The clouds turned dark, lighting up in a purple glow, dark purple thunder bolts raining down. Armageddon. Madara stretched his hands out into the sky, shooting purple lightning out from the tip of his fingers, adding to the power of the storm. Thunderbolts rained down from the clouds, piercing through the dark solar spheres of I. The dark lightning storm moved like a giant serpent, clouding the dark solar spheres. Waves of light shot out from the storm clouds, lighting up the sky brighter than any sunset. Down within the lower levels of the ruins of the Fairy Tail Guildhall, within the room containing the legendary Lumen Histoire, Makarov and Mavis both looked up at a crystal ball showing them the events outside. What's more, they could feel what went down outside. "What power? What kind of monsters have you created, Zirf?" Mavis stared at the blinding lights from Madara and I's attacks. The entire sky was lit up in a fantastic explosion of dark power, casting a dark purple glow shining over the entire town of Magnolia. The explosion dragging in both I and Madara. The bright light shining like a star from the port of Harjan, all the way to the capital where Princess Hisui witnessed it from her castle. It stretched far and wide, beyond the skies and to the heavens, to the very earth, forming a wide crater. Acnologia whimpered away, having suffered enough damage at the hands of I and the fire dragon King Igneel. The black dragon growled and left feeling a bittersweet sense of victory. Zirf watched the black dragon fly by, a smirk spread across his face. "Seems even you realize the destructive powers of my 2 creations." Madara and Itachi, the demon of war and the demon of extinction. Truly a magnificent sight to behold. The explosion shrank and imploded, with two figures coming crashing down into the crater. Dust gathered up around these two figures, one still standing and one laying beaten on the ground. The smoke cleared, revealing long white hair turning pitch black, the skin going from white to normal, and the black marks around his body fading away as well. The figure that remained standing was Madara, standing over the beaten E. Madara looked both impressed and disappointed at the same time. This monster has power of a god, and yet he doesn't know how to use it. Madara looked down upon the beaten, bruised up and bloodied E while wondering how strong Itachi would be should he master this power, feeling slightly excited over the potential future challenge. The rumbling of destruction had ceased, everything was quiet. The fairy tale wizards had all gathered around a single spot, a gigantic crater where the sensation of great power still lingered. Natsu was the only one who didn't move, his eyes frozen in horror as he stared down at Ignil's fried corpse, while the injured Acnologue retreated into the distance to lick his wounds. While also feeling satisfied at having slayed a dragon after all this time, having almost forgotten the taste of dragon blood. In the smoking crater, where flickers of dark lightning sparked every now and then. In the center of the crater laid a broken and defeated E, with a slight injured Madara looking down on him with his arms crossed. The fairy tale wizards surrounding the crater could only watch in disbelief. Despite with that kind of power, he lost, Laxus uttered, having trouble just standing up, so Kana had to support him up. Oni-san, Urza and Mira Jane both supported each other, and looked in worry wondering if Madara was planning to kill Itachi. The sensation of fear was visible within all the fairy tale wizards. If Madara wanted to kill Itachi they wouldn't be able to stop him even if they outnumbered him 1 to 1,000. He isn't reverting back to normal. Mira trembled, wondering if Itachi would ever return to normal or if he had completely taken over and Itachi was no more. Even though E was defeated, Itachi showed no signs of reclaiming control from within. The black spheres around Itachi all crumbled, and out from one of them fell out his book. Madara looked to the book, and picked it up, using his Sharingan to read through every word written in it. I see, so that's how it is. That is Itachi, or rather E's book. If we can get our hands on that maybe we can find a way to bring Itachi back. Gray suggested, in his own hand holding onto the book of END which he intended to destroy after all this. Natsu wanted to give this book to Ignil for some reason, although now it seemed like Natsu didn't care about that. Gray looked behind him, seeing Natsu whimpering over Ignil's corpse, feeling sympathy for the Dragon Slayer having also lost his father today. Let's get it then. Gajeel halted himself from trembling at the aura released from Madara, as he, Gray and Laxus all seemed ready to rush at Madara all at once. Wait, Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu jumped before them, halting them from doing something foolish. That down there is Madara, the Madara. Going down there is suicide. Sasori warned them. If we don't Itachi might die. Mira and Urza joined up with Gray, Laxus and Gajeel ready to fight their way through. I doubt that. A new voice went like an echo around them, and the END book from Gray's grasp vanished in a flash. And in the crater Sadid E's book from Madara's hand, causing him to growl in annoyance. These are my books. They heard footsteps, causing them all to freeze as they could feel it. Death was in the air. They all slowly turned around to face this new individual. Even Natsu turned around from mourning Ignil, recognizing this voice. I'm taking them back. They are very important, you see. There stood Zirf, with that emotionless stare in his eyes and a smile. Zirf, Natsu uttered, which didn't go unnoticed by the Dragon Slayers and their enhanced sense of hearing. This is Zirf? Gajeel questioned, causing Gray to tense up, only able to recall Deliora and all the pain that monster brought him. And here, standing before him, was the man who created that monster. I came here to witness E's progress, as well as to settle things between us. Zirf looked to Natsu, who grinded his teeth in anger with tears still running down his cheeks. The hell you talking about? Natsu growled in anger, not wanting to deal with this after having witnessed Ignil die before his very eyes. In time everything will be clear. But for now, Zirf vanished from the spot he stood, and instantly appeared next to Madara and the unconscious E. I shall put my dearest creation back to his slumber. Zirf reached his hand out, and brought it closer to Itachi's body. No. The rush of adrenaline caused Urza, Mira, Laxus, Gray all to rush down, not liking the sound of those words from the Black Wizard and Madara. Each ready to strike down the Black Wizard and Madara before either could potentially kill Itachi. Due to also being a target of their assault, Madara swiftly moved, delivering a single strike to the 4 attackers, sending them crashing into the crater. Madara didn't say a single word, merely gazing onto the books of E and END within Zeref's palm. Zeref, without anyone else to interrupt, in surprise to everyone, merely poked Itachi's forehead in the same fashion the young Uchiha always did to his own younger brother. Itachi's body began to glow, his skin regaining its natural color, his hair returning from white to black. His horns of darkness vanishing, followed by the speck of darkness from his very body, leaving Itachi completely naked. Now then, shall we get going? Zeref looked to Madara, who merely gave a nod. Madara cast a single look down upon Itachi at first, recalling that power displayed from the child in his ethereous form. If he ever learned to control it, Itachi could become quite the opponent in the future, which was more than enough of a reason for Madara to let him live. Wait, what are your goals in all of this? What are you two plotting? Urza shouted to Madara and Zeref, earning her a glance from the Black Wizard. Irene's, Zeref thought, to which he smiled at Urza, while as Madara merely ignored her, feeling like he didn't need to answer. I can't speak for Madara here, but personally, my goal is the death of this era. Zeref replied as both he and Madara began to glow. Farewell for now, fairy tale. Meanwhile, at the top of the crater, new figures arrived to witness the aftermath. Jalal and Crime Sorcier, Ultir ran up front and stared down the crater, seeing as everyone else did, and she widened her eyes at what she saw. Her father, he fit the description she had gotten from her mother as well as the former members of Oracion Cease. Father, Ultir shouted from the top of her lungs. The ghost of the Uchiha flinched a little, finding that voice familiar yet at the same time different. As he turned to the source out of curiosity, it was too late. He and Zeref vanished in a flash, leaving mere dust behind them. Ultir clenched her fists and fell to her knees, too late once again to get a chance to speak with her father and ask him these questions bobbling up inside her. The fairy tale members didn't bother questioning what had happened, it was all over. Everyone besides Natsu went down to check on the unconscious naked Itachi. Mira placed her ear onto his chest, hearing a steady heartbeat. Thank goodness, he seems like he is going to be alright. Mira sighed in relief, although they would bring him to Perliuzica to make sure everything was fine later. Dang Mira, you are sure one lucky girl. With everything being calm now, and no danger in sight, everyone was able to relax, and Kana found this to be a good opportunity to tease Mira. Mira blinked in confusion, seeing the female members of the guild eyeing something while blushing a little, some even gulping. Mira then realized and looked at Itachi, seeing his naked body and manhood. Mira's face began resembling the shade of red like Urza's hair, and she instantly summoned forth a blanket to cover Itachi up. Ah, dang, the eye candy is gone. Kana giggled a little from seeing Mira's reaction to all this. The mood was leveled down, as in the sky soaring above them were 4 dragons. One pure white covered in feathers, one that looked to be made out of iron, one white dragon and one black dragon. It was the dragons of Gajiel, Wendy, Sting and Rogue. The dragons went on to explain the same thing Igneel had told Natsu before his death. And also adding that they as well as Igneel were already long dead. And that they lived in the bodies of the dragon slayers to extend their remaining lifespan, all for the purpose of fighting Acnologia. And that once they left their bodies, they would be unable to return, so this would be the last time they got to see them. How all had given most of their energy for the purpose of Igneel, the strongest amongst them, to fight Acnologia. They all saw their dragons off, as their spirits vanished into the new morning sun. Even Igneel's spirit, leaving before the morning Natsu's eyes. Who made a vow, I will defeat Acnologia, I swear it, Natsu cried out as his proud father's spirit vanished before him. What followed was the town beginning to rebuild what was destroyed in the aftermath of the battle against Tartaros. Laxus and the Thunder God tribe were given their cure and healed. Gray went to his hometown to visit the grave of his parents as well as add his father's name to the grave. And Juvia followed him, expressing her guilt over killing the necromancer so that Gray lost his father again. Yet instead of getting the reaction she expected, he cried and thanked her. Minerva returned to Sabretooth with Sting and Rogue, and Makarov revealed something important to Dorenbolt, or rather Mest, as well as announcing something outrageous. Then there was Itachi, who remained unconscious for a few days in the aftermath of everything, even with Mira nursing him back to health. Everything was dark for the young Uchiha, he felt like hell. His head was aching like crazy, his body felt somewhat numb. He groggily opened up his eyes, welcomed by the sight of a blinding light from a ceiling lamp. He blinked his eyes, getting used to this light. Itachi forced himself to sit up, rubbing his temple as he tried to recall what had happened. He took a few deep breaths and tried to gather his thoughts, to which he remembered. Tartaros, Zirf, Madara, Acnologate all began coming back to him. As well as flashes of images, of him, fighting Natsu and Grey. Him trying to kill Natsu and Grey, him fighting two dragons, one being Acnologion, the other being Igneel. Then flashed of a smiling Madara, he fought Madara, and he lost. Itachi's eyes shot open, a look of fear and concern spread across his face. His worry was eased, however, as he felt a warm embrace. He saw silver-white hair fall down before his eyes followed and laid themselves upon the image of Mira Jane hugging him. It's okay, sweetie. You didn't hurt anyone, everyone is fine. Mira soothed him, it was like she could read his mind. Then again, it could also be because of what happened last time he lost control after the events with the dragons. Itachi couldn't manage to formulate his thoughts into words, no matter how hard he tried his mouth wouldn't let the words out. Instead he felt a wash of relief over him that he didn't kill anyone. Don't say anything, you don't have to say anything. Just stay like this with me for a bit longer. Mira tightened her hold on him, refusing to budge or to let go. He could feel her tears falling onto his shoulder, she must have been worried sick about him. Itachi felt a lump in his throat, unable to speak or make a sound. All he could was hug Mira Jane back while she cried into his shoulder. I was so scared that we had lost you for good this time. She whimpered while Itachi gently stroked her hair, her body trembling in his big strong arms. I'm not going anywhere. Itachi finally managed to speak out. He and Mira parted back a little, looking into each other's eyes. Slowly leaning their faces closer, their soft lips met in a passionate kiss. Time froze for the two lovebirds, Itachi's tongue entering Mira's mouth and gently massaging her tongue. Things began heating up as Mira started to retaliate with her tongue. Ahem. Both lovers instantly parted way from their kiss in shock, and both looked to the door, seeing a smug-looking Kisame. Sorry to interrupt the love fest, but we have some business to discuss. Kisame chuckled a little, seeing both Itachi and Mira looking slightly embarrassed. Now that's an expression I never thought I would see you make, Itachi-san. Itachi flinched a little, his eyebrow twitching a little in annoyance. What do you want, Kisame? Itachi looked to his former teammate. Now, calm down. Afterwards there will be plenty of time for you two to get wild underneath the sheets. But we have something we would like to discuss. Kisame looked like he was having the time of his life teasing Itachi like this. Itachi raised his brow, and entering behind Kisame were Sasori and Kakuzu. You said we could all start a new life of redemption. So, we thought to ask if you had any idea where to start. Sasori pushed himself through Kisame, looking as emotionless as ever. Actually, I do, Itachi replied, to which all three looked intrigued. Before that, there is something you should know. Mira interrupted, to which now Itachi looked intrigued, wondering what it could be. Well, while you were unconscious, the master, he disbanded the guild. The news hit Itachi like a lightning strike. Fairy Tail is disbanded. Itachi looked in slight disbelief, trying to think of why Makarov would suddenly make that decision. He could only think of one logical answer, Madara. Naturally Makarov would be frightened or nervous after witnessing the power of the mightiest man the Uchiha clan has ever produced. Yeah, it came as a shock to all of us as well. Most have gone to a tavern to drown their sorrows away. Others have just gone home. Looks like everyone will be going their separate ways soon. Itachi couldn't believe what he was hearing, his family was being divided. Can't be, I doubt someone like Natsu, for example, would just sit idly by. Knowing him, he must be tracking Makarov down to force him to revive Fairy Tail. Itachi couldn't imagine the pink-haired dragon slayer doing it any other way. Well, he was mourning the loss of Igneel the last time I saw him. He probably doesn't even know the guild has been disbanded. Mira replied, to which Itachi started to get flashes of Igneel's death at the hands of Acnologion Madara. I see, Itachi felt sympathy for Natsu, having lost his father figure and all. But hope had not died within them all just yet. Itachi knew that someday, someone would begin gathering up their comrades and rebuild their home and revive Fairy Tail from its ashes. Guess I can't invite you guys to join our guild then. Itachi looked to the former Akatsuki members. Yeah, You weren't going to suggest that. Kakuzu dismissed the idea of Itachi ever inviting them to Fairy Tail. To which Itachi smiled a little, confirming Kakuzu's statement. True, but it was one option in case the first one didn't work. Okay what is the first suggestion you have? Kisame questioned, really curious as to what Itachi had planned. A knock came from the other side of the door, and in entered Urza, followed by Jalal. Itachi greeted them both with a smile. Perfect timing. Jalal, I would like to introduce you to Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu. Pleasure, my name is Jalal Fernandez. Jalal greeted the three former Akatsuki members with a bow. They are some old friends of mine, looking for redemption. I think you might be able to help them out in that regard. Itachi hinted, to which Jalal looked a little astonished, and looked back to the trio. Okay, what are you guilty of? Jalal asked, to which the three of them looked amongst themselves. Murder, treason, terrorism, I think that about sums it up. Kisame looked to Sasori and Kakuzu, who both gave a shrug as those three words pretty much summed it up without the need to go into further detail. I see. Jalal looked to Itachi with a look that said, seriously, to which Itachi just shrugged. They have been misguided along the paths of life. Just like you, and the others in your little independent guild. I suppose if you vouch for them, I guess I could consider it. Jalal held great respect for Itachi, and trusted him a great deal. The only person he probably trusted even more than Itachi was Urza herself. Oni-san, are you really serious about this? Urza still looked a little on edge considering all three of them had been enemies of theirs in the past. And Kisame defeated both her and Mira Jane in combat. I am, although if you doubt me, then I can find elsewhere for them to go. No, it's fine, although I will need time to find out if I can trust them. From what I've heard from Urza, they are demons of the books of Zirf. Then again, so are you. Jalal looked concerned for Itachi, wondering if Itachi himself would ever fall into the clutches of Zirf. We might be demons, but we hold no loyalty towards Zirf. Kakuzu added, saying the Black Wizard's name in a hint of a venomous tone. He might have brought us back, but some of us might not be so grateful for it. Sasori showed signs of anger at the thought of the Black Wizard. We sided with Tartaros purely because we had nowhere else to turn to. Itachi-san has kindly provided us such a place. This independent guild of yours, it doesn't follow the rules of the government, correct? Kisame looked to Jalal, who nodded in response, which earned a smirk from all three former Akatsuki members. Sounds refreshing. Well, that is something I like to hear. Sasori agreed, not wanting to deal with the pain of the government's rules and policy. Well, not that they would do anything that criminal. As long as there is money to be made, I'm happy either way. Kakuzu began imagining counting piles of cash, as always to Kakuzu money is everything. So, along with 5 former members of the Oracion Cease, Crime Sorcier has a total of 11 members. Or perhaps even more. I originally came here to request you join me as well, Itachi. Jalal revealed, to which Urza herself even looked shocked, clearly being the first time she had heard of this. That's what you wanted to talk to him about? I honestly didn't expect this of you, Jalal. Urza looked to her brother, also awaiting his answer, although she already knew it. Sorry, but, disbanded or not, the only emblem I shall carry is this. Itachi held his right hand out, showing the red fairy tail emblem at the back of his hand. Although, until the time comes for Fairy Tail's revival, I wouldn't mind tagging along. To Itachi, this seemed like the best option for him right now. Not only would he have time to train, he would also get to keep an eye out on Kisame, Kakuzu and Sasori. Just in case they were to fall back onto their dark paths. Plus, it would give him a chance to find out more about Zirf. I should have expected that from you. Very well, you are welcome to travel with us. Jalal agreed, at least he would get Itachi's help even if he didn't want to become a member. I will come too. Urza practically went up to Jalal's face and demanded, to which the wanted criminal backed up in shock. I'm not sure if that's. Before Jalal could decline, the other woman in the room spoke up. Count me in. Oh, I can bring Lizana and Elfman with us. It will be like a vacation. Mira cheerfully clapped, to which Itachi's sweat dropped a little. Wait. Before Jalal could decline again. Just give up. Once those two have made up their minds on something, it's hopeless to try and convince them of otherwise. Itachi smiled a little at seeing Jalal's pale-looking dumbfounded expression. In the end, he had no choice but to give in to their demands. Out in the forests outside of the Magnolia border, laid a simple small hut with the names Natsu and Happy on the sign outside. Well buddy, time to go. Natsu packed his backpack, and threw it over his shoulder, while Happy stuffed his green bag with lots of fish. Aye sir, Happy cheered, both ready for their own training trip, and neither being aware that meanwhile their guild was being disbanded. Happily and unknowingly they set out for their journey, but not before leaving a letter in Lucis' apartment about where they were going. Yosh, I'm ready, just you watch Igneel, I will become crazy strong and wipe the floor with Acnologia. Oh yeah, I'm fired up now, Natsu roared with a burning passion while Happy added an, aye sir, at the end as they both ran through the gate leading into Magnolia. Meanwhile, up in the mountains outside of Magnolia, Itachi looked down from the mountainside ridge upon the town of Magnolia. The warm red light of the sunset illuminating the town. Itachi's gaze focused upon a smoking crater at the very edge of the town, the remains of the Fairy Tail Guildhall. A place he has called his home ever since he arrived into this world. And now it was gone. The laughter of his guildmates back in the good old days went on like a ghostly echo in the back of his mind. After everything they had been through together, the guild was no more. Troubled thoughts of Madara, Zirf, Acnologia, and of his E-persona plagued his mind like a nightmare. He lightly clenched his fist as the strong mountain wind blew through his long black hair, drying up a single tear falling down his cheek in a mere instant. Itachi felt a tug onto his sleeve. He turned around to see the beloved face of his girlfriend Mira Jane. She looked sad from also having lost her home, but yet she smiled lovingly onto him like if everything was going to be alright as long as they had each other. Come on, let's go. She called out to him and they walked together up the mountain while holding hands, and at the top waited Urza, Elfman, Lizana, Jalal, Altair, Meridi, Kisame, Sasori, Kakuzu, Macbeth, Eric, Serrano, Sawyer and Richard. All ready for their new journey together, awaiting the one day that Fairy Tail would return. The sun sets for today, and tomorrow the sun shall rise again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The next part will be out soon.